Hello, and thank you for joining me on the Innovate, Thrive, Other podcast, where I dig into all things small business. I'm really excited you're here, and I can't wait to explore the realities of running a business with you. This week, I'm joined by Nancy Evbuomwan from Uniqueable to talk through the fascinating subject of how to grow and scale a business. Hello, Nancy. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure.
I'm being very polite here.
I know. I'm really hoping I pronounced your name right.
No, you did.
Okay, cool. So I cannot wait for this conversation.
Yes.
We do fairly similar things, and we have lots of animated conversations on our own on Zoom. And yes. I think they are well worth putting out into the public sphere because, we talk about the practicalities and realities of running a business, which is what this podcast is all about. So can't wait to dig into that with you. But first of all, though, tell us about you and Uniqueable and what you do and where it came from.
Cool. So my name is Nancy. I am the founder and main business strategist at Uniqueable. And as a business, and it's also why we're called Uniqueable, it's really about making it possible for small businesses to maintain unique by helping them scale. And the way we do that is through our hand-holding kind of consulting package, but we also provide a range of, I would say, like, practical down to the detail masterclass. And we also do kind of emergency packages where people can pick my brain for an hour. And where did it come from? It came out of lockdown. 2020, because I saw a whole bunch of smaller businesses really struggle either pivoting to the digital space, or they essentially were just struggling to grow despite getting tons of followers on Instagram, which might trigger some people.
Honestly, like the last two podcasts have taken a baseball bat to Instagram completely unintentionally, but yes, many challenges for businesses in that space.
Many. And I think there's a huge misconception around scaling. And my background is a lot in helping people create digital products and bring them online and then also scale those digital products. And I've been doing that for the past 6 years. And there's so much amazing stuff that I've learned from the corporate world and also just from the tech startup world that I bring into smaller businesses. And to be specific, we primarily work with service-based businesses. So that would be like your therapist, your trainers, your coaches, your brand strategists, etc. So anyone whose value proposition lies in the service space. And so that's a bit about me and what Uniqueable is and what we do.
Nice. I love it. Okay, so the first question that I ask everybody, would you say that you and or your business are innovating, thriving, or other this week?
Other this week because I'm in a similar bottleneck where I actually unstuck my clients with, and that is you get to a point where you alone cannot, like you are the bottleneck of your business. And that became quite noticeable when I realized that we were taking on a lot more clients. And I say we, because I do have, I do delegate some stuff and I have some people on my team. But we were getting to the place where unless I could duplicate myself, the business would be in a place where it would plateau or get stagnant. So that's why I say other, but that's probably more around like the 70% other, but 30% we're definitely innovating because we're looking at, again, our challenge is that there's a huge misconception around what it means to scale your business because everyone is trying to 10x their business, or I'm going to promise you 6-figure salaries, which it's something I don't do. And I'm upfront with my clients about it, but we are thinking of innovative ways where we can kind of break down that taboo. So I think it's a bit of both. I hope that answers your question.
It does. And what I'm finding fascinating, when I first sort of devised this question, I thought it was going to be quite straightforward. And then I realized that often they coexist, right?
Yeah.
So you have a bit like joy and sadness can coexist.
Absolutely.
Innovating often, I think I said on a previous podcast, like when I'm innovating, I feel like I'm thriving because that's my comfort zone and like where I get excited and I feel like I'm buzzing. Ultimately, I end up exhausted and then it becomes a different kind of thriving where I have to take time back and
Yeah.
look after myself, and then I feel like I'm thriving in a different way. But then there's inevitably stuff going on in the business. There's things that we're constantly reviewing, refining, and learning, and failing at, and taking as learnings, and that is kind of in the other space, I suppose, is the
My therapist calls it the gray space. And it's like, it's really hard to hold the gray space because there's a lot of ambiguity, and we are naturally wired to not want ambiguity because we can't predict if we're going to die or stay alive, and not to turn it into like a dooms and gloom. But that's like, it's like you're constantly battling biology versus your need to want to grow a business. And biology is like, we don't like this. This is too ambiguous and too gray. And I'm going to come in with self-sabotaging beliefs. And that's why I think you're right. It's never black and white. It's always a bit gray. Not even a bit. I think like 80% of running a business is gray.
Yeah. And that takes time to get comfortable with, like, especially coming out of employment where it's very straightforward and you have your set of tasks and your responsibilities, and it's all very clearly defined and nothing really changes, and it's very kind of stable and secure. And then you come into running a business and you're like, oh what is this?
I didn't read this in the books or the Medium list, or none of the Instagram accounts of people who say quit your day job, do this, tell you about this. Like, why did everyone lie to me?
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say it must be like having a child, but it must really not be like having a child. Spoken as the woman without a child. It's
As a woman with a newborn puppy, I can definitely say that nothing prepares you for this. Like, just nothing. Like, it will get to a point where you really just have to stop digesting and consuming new information.
Yes.
Because you're gonna there's something called analysis paralysis, where you are just taking so much information that you just get paralyzed, and you just want to eat Ben and Jerry's and sit in bed and then scroll through Instagram, because the idea of taking the first step towards running a business, or even trying to keep your business alive, you're just like, what's the step forward?
Yeah. And often when you're taking in everybody else's information, you forget about your own. Like, you forget to rationalize it with your experience and what you know and what you feel and what you want to achieve and your versions of success. And then you just absorb everybody else's. You feel, or can be tempted to feel, like that's the way to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem with like a lot of strategies around how to grow your business, is that there's a big myth. If you follow these 5-10 steps, you will overnight become a 6-figure, or in 6 months become a 6-figure business. And I think that's such a shame, because it's wasted energy. People with good intentions purchase these pretty pricey accelerator programs, master classes, attend them, and then nothing changes. And I think the reason why nothing changes is because ultimately you need to find a way to apply all of these theory to your scenario.
Yeah.
Your clients are going to be very, very different to the next business.
Yeah.
Even though you could be in a similar industry. So,
and I think that's a really key, probably going to be a key takeaway from this whole podcast, actually, is that there is a vast difference between somebody telling you a methodology and you, and possibly with somebody working through principles to apply them to your business and your goals and your version of success and your products and your audience and all of your stuff to make it successful for you, and not try to replicate what somebody else has achieved in a different space or with something else.
Absolutely.
It's a challenging one, because that's not the common messages that we're seeing, right?
No, and I think that's why I personally really hate Instagram, because I don't hate it. I like it, but I also hate it at the same time. The part that I don't like is that I don't like creating these standard templates of follow these steps and then therefore you'll get this result. But you kind of have to if you want to drive engagement, because ultimately once that person takes the information and tries to apply it, it's like, oh, this doesn't work. Why doesn't it work?
Yeah. And I think the skill that comes with being a business consultant is that like I have my frameworks, and I'm sure you have frameworks, but they're not rigid and they're not prescriptive. So it's a framework of almost like thinking in terms of what you assess, how you approach something. But every single time you work with a client, the outcome and the detail of it is different, because it gets completely tailored to the person you're working with. And that skill is actually, without blowing our own trumpets, that's actually quite a difficult skill to master.
It's hard, very hard, very
Yeah.
hard. So there's something called passive think. So there's something called the ladder of thinking. And essentially it takes the ladder and it breaks it down to 3 sections. You've got passive thinking, active thinking, and then meta-active thinking. Passive thinking is very much give me instructions, I'll just follow and execute it. And that's where most content that you see these days around business, operations, processes, how to scale sits within, follow these steps and you'll get this. And I think that's where people sit down and just kind of consume. But once you try and apply it, it doesn't work. And that's because a lot of these principles, these theories, they live in the space that require you to do active or meta-active thinking. And active thinking is just basically, I'm going to take this principle and try and make it apply for me.
Yeah.
And a meta-active thinking is I'm going to use this principle along with other stuff to make it work for me. And that's a really hard space to be in, because again, there lies a lot of ambiguity. And I think maybe that's where people like yourself and me kind of are of value, is that you're hand holding people through that process. And you're kind of like constantly supporting them through that process, be it a pep talk here or really kind of getting them to kind of sit down and really think about it. Deep thinking about it. I think that's really kind of like where we come in. And I will not hold back from saying that we're tooting our own horn, because I think we're doing some pretty awesome work, and that should be right.
I agree. And I feel super proud of it in a world. And when I say world, I mean in an online business world that is full of, like you say, 10 steps or do X equals Y, and that kind of business growth advertising, whatever you want to call it. Like, I'm super proud that we just stick to our guns and say no. Like, that's not going to work for everybody. That, in fact, that's not going to work for the vast majority, or it won't work for long.
Absolutely.
And there's a better way.
Absolutely. I always promise my clients or even leads when we talk initially, I always tell them, I don't promise you 10x growth. I don't promise 6-figure salaries or revenue. But what I do promise is that you're going to feel super confident applying these principles, even when I'm no longer around. So you can think clearly about what to do yourself. So you're self-sufficient. And it's not super sexy, but hey.
Isn't that the hard thing? Like, telling people about it, you're like, yes, you'll feel more confident. Like, okay, good. But, and it's actually quite hard to convey the benefits of the non-sexy side of business.
Absolutely.
So I guess what I would love to dig in with you, because your kind of specialism and where you focus your strategic brain is on commercializing of products, as you said, with digital products and services and things. So it would be really great to hear from you. What are the common challenges? If somebody is thinking about scaling, what are they likely to encounter with that?
I think the first myth, or the thing that they would likely encounter, is the belief of, I need to create more services. I need to create more services so I can get to more people. But more often, it's really about, I need to enable my business to handle a higher volume of people.
Right.
And then after that, so once you get that part out of the way, the second part is, I need to create new services. No, that's still a myth. Really, you might want to just improve your existing services.
Yes.
And this is about introducing tighter feedback loops between you and your customers. And for me, the low-hanging fruit that a lot of businesses that are looking to scale, what they don't make the most of is just implementing little surveys at key touch points, such as from the moment that someone purchased an item to maybe 10 days after, 30 days after, just to give you a bit of feedback. Because essentially, once your service or your product is out in the world, you don't know what's happening to it. and you want to get that feedback so that you can identify if there are things that you want to tweak about it, and maybe launch new and improved versions of existing services. So those are kind of like two things that I think a lot of people miss when they think of commercialization and scaling, because quite often it's really not about launching something new. And I think the third thing that I bang on a lot about is increasing your price. Um, this, I mean, we laugh about it, but in reality, if you do the maths around, okay, how many units will I have to sell in order for me to get to 60K, because 60K is what I'm after, because that's enough for me to have a good living life in London or whatever city you live in. You reverse that, engineer that backwards, and you realize, okay, actually I can reduce the number of selling units, by simply upping the price by maybe £10, £20, £100. And people go, oh no, but I'm not sure. And I'm like, in reality, if you were to really list down the changes that you bring to your clients, do you think that an additional £50 or £100 is worth it? And when you look at it from that perspective, you actually end up realizing that you've been underselling, or undervaluing your existing services. So those are my kind of like, if you're not in the space, in the thinking space of launching something new, and tomorrow you want to start looking at implementing ways to grow your business, I would start at those areas.
I think that's awesome. And yeah, obviously completely agree with them. And I think often when we think about innovation and growth, we think about new things, shiny objects. What can I do? What's missing? And we're doing the gap analysis all the time. And actually, you're right, like going back to basics, back to the services you offer, or products that you offer, whichever way it is. I love the Pareto Principle. So, looking at where 80% of your income's coming from, they're your killer services and products. They're the ones that people want. So what can you do to improve them? And actually at the same time, you can get rid of the other, maybe the percentage that isn't generating the income, whatever that looks like for you. 80-20 is a good rule to look at, but it's not it's fairly arbitrary. You can flex that as you want. But if you can simplify what you're doing, improve what you've got, that's when things start to get exciting in terms of scaling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that, so for me, when I think of scaling, really what I'm telling myself is, how can we get more of the magic that you create in other people's life to as many people as possible? And that might look into, if you are a service-based business, it could look into, can we productionize or turn the services into digital products and give that out to people? Because we might have aspects of what we do in a one-to-one service, kind of high touch engagement, that people can do by themselves, but we need to package our IPs. And that's such a golden nugget of like packaging your knowledge in either ebooks, masterclasses, digital courses, anything. I mean, the list goes on, right? And these are, again, repurposing existing services so you can service more people. And that is really what scaling also is about, other than scaling from a financial perspective. It's also scaling from a perspective of, how can I get more of my magic to as many people as possible, and impact. And that's a really exciting space to be in. And so for service-based businesses, is turning services into products. And for product-based businesses, it's either about diversifying existing products into perhaps new market segments. So I give this example of, I could be selling wine at the moment as a winery or a wine store, and I realize that a lot of our clients also have pets. Can we produce pet drinks? Because we've realized and discovered that pet owners love to drink with their pets. And that's, again, we're not necessarily drastically changing what we offer. We're offering an existing thing that we do really well, which is producing wine, but we're now tailoring it so that we can now go into the market of pet owners. And I think that's why I think it's such a pragmatic and sustainable way of looking at growth. It's looking at, what are we doing well already? What can we bring into new markets? What opportunities do we have doing what we do well now. I think most people go straight into new market, new products. And I often think that's such a tricky place to be in because there's so much newness in that space. And then not only are you trying to get a new audience and a new market, but you're also trying to test a new product. And I always like the idea and the stoic view of focus on one thing and do it really, really
Yeah,
well,
I love it.
over
And that's
just
the
overstretching yourself.
kind of Michael Gerber e-myth, isn't it? You view your business as a product, you perfect your product, and then you can replicate it, whether that's scaling it up or franchising it or whatever you choose to do with it. But you nail that initial concept of the business with the products and
Absolutely.
services contained within it,
Absolutely.
before you start thinking about, the exciting stuff that comes after that.
Absolutely.
Because if anything is going to stress test your business, it will be putting more clients through it, or putting more products out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to have everything as far as possible. There's always going to be things that, room for improvement, obviously, but as far as possible, securing it up as much as you
I
can.
mean, the one question I ask people when they come to me saying, I want to grow my business is if 200 clients were to knock on your door today saying they want to work with you, could your business handle that volume? And then most people would say, I can hire people. And I'm like, let's say you don't have budget to hire people, but you still have 200 people knocking on your door. And I guess it's a pressure test because I'm trying to get these founders who approach me and just even people who are listening, I'm trying to get you to think about ways of optimizing areas of your business because it's kind of like what bottlenecks currently exist that stops me from replicating the magic that I have for my clients. And what you end up realizing is that most service-based businesses have a really manual heavy onboarding process.
Right. Yes.
And it's like, boom, that's where your bottleneck is. It's the moment someone gives you money, onboarding them onto your business is where your bottleneck is. And really, what you want to get to is while you are working with Tom, Simon, and Sarah, who own a bunch of businesses, you're delivering their projects, you're also onboarding a new set of businesses. And you want to do that really seamlessly. And I guess there are so many tools out there, whether it's MailChimp integrated with Stripe, that allows you to do that, or Active Campaign integrated with Stripe, and then Calendly, like all of these tools are there. And I think that's the bedrock that I think of. Get those things out of the way because it's going to free up so much space in your brain around what other areas can you then commercialize in your business. So yeah, I get really excited and I geek out about these things.
Me too. Literally, I could go down a rabbit hole of of the processes and systems required for growth as well, growth and scaling. Because if you're a one-person business, and you haven't really given it any consideration up to today, there's a chance that the systems you have in place are fine for where you are now, but the second you put more through them, or the processes you have in place are fine for now, but they're not suitable for high volume stuff.
Exactly.
And it's that consideration. If you, like you're saying, you can think about it all now so that you're ready to grow, rather than backtracking and trying to plug the gaps as you're growing, which is the most stressful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not impossible, but stressful.
It's not, and I get it. It's really boring. It's really boring to write copy so I always tell people, like, your onboarding experience needs to almost be like a training experience. So you're training your clients to become the best clients ever because it makes your life easy. But that means downloading a lot of best practices, things that you want your customers to know that is in your head on paper. And that stuff is boring because that probably means sitting down for a couple of days, writing up newsletter templates, not newsletters, I mean like how-to templates, or kind of like a prep template email, and get all of that written. And it's not fun because you much rather post something on social media and get the likes because there's instant feedback with that. But trust me, if you can dedicate a couple of days in a quarter where you set these things up in place, even if you don't have a high volume of customers,
Yeah.
that one or two customers coming in while you're sleeping or sipping a pina colada, or I'm not judging you, binging on a Netflix show, you can do that. Because you're not thinking, oh crap, I need to stop Bridgerton so that I can go and respond to this email of someone who's requested information about how I work. And it's just those little things, really, that I think is part of commercializing your business. Because I think most people think, so commercializing your business, I think inward, what do we have to change? And then look externally into the market and where are the opportunities. So yeah, that's really,
and the
really cool
external
stuff.
stuff's exciting.
Yes.
That's the forward moving stuff. The inward stuff is like, oh, do I have to? Who can I get to do it for me?
Absolutely. And there's no, I mean, the way how we work is we first look at the inward stuff, and it's kind of like, okay, what stuff can we improve now that would kind of enhance the commercialization of your business, i.e. what stuff can we improve inside your business so you can handle more people? So that's what we look at. And a lot of it is down to customer experience, streamlining that, actually designing a customer experience. People don't think about that, because whatever your customer experience is for your business, it's going to look very different to Sasha, who sells porridge, or Simon, who's a brand strategist. Different customer experience, different expectations. It's going to be very different. So once you do that stuff out of the way, then you can kind of look into the market, and let's then run business experiments. And that's the fun side because I've got clients who are like, oh, I couldn't run the business experiments that we came up with because I was onboarding. And I'm like, I don't want that.
No. No, there shouldn't be any blockers. And these are the challenges and blockers, right? So these are the things that could stop you and stop your ambitions in their tracks if you don't get them sorted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me about some other things you've found. Like if people are growing and scaling and they, are just kind of winging it, what are some of the things that crop up that can
not testing the market? So one of the big things that we do with our clients is running business experiments. And that's actually the part that I enjoy the most, because it's about being clear about what we believe is true and what we have to test out. And running an experiment really gives us that direct information on whether or not an idea has legs to stand on before we commit to it. And the really cool thing is that you can run a business experiment in 3 to 4 weeks and learn heaps from it, versus 3-4 weeks, build something, launch it for 6 months, and then learn from it.
Right.
So that learning and that feedback loop stuff that I spoke about earlier, one thing that creeps up is just basically people don't test the market. And I know there's lots of thoughts around build an MVP, but again, that comes back to all the information out there is all about like what you have to do, but not how.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that people are struggling with. Like, everyone knows you have to test an idea. Everyone knows you have to test a market, but no one knows how. I think that's the part that creeps up on people. It's like, I'm sitting on an idea and I've created it. I've tested it. I've created it. There's an MVP, or for those who don't know what an MVP is, a minimal viable product. I always say MVT, what's the minimal viable thing we can test?
Right.
And put that out there.
Yeah.
And how
that's
you
a really
do that.
Good way to phrase it. I've never thought of it like that. And that's what I do, but I've never thought of it in that way. So thank you. I'm going to pinch that.
No worries at all.
Don't mind.
But it's like, but then also like the test that you choose, there are different ways you can test something out, whether or not it's market research, whether or not it's a field research, which is a bit hard given COVID, whether or not it is you just kind of talk to people, so an interview style, or you create, it's called a fake door test. And that's basically where you put something online. It's not really there. It's just a landing page, and you want to see how many people click on purchase. And then also maybe you want to test out if people are willing to actually pay for it. So something that's great that you can do is on your landing page, put a purchase button, people click on it, they make the payment, but you give them the money back, because all you are interested in is, are people willing to pay for this idea? And I think these are the elements that you really want to test early on, because what you don't want to do is 6 months down the line after you've launched a business and told every Tom, Dick, and Harry that, oh, I'm going to become a CEO or a founder.
Yeah.
And there, it's just like tumbleweed going through your mind and your business because there's no one paying for your stuff. So I think that's the thing that people skip.
Honestly, I just sat here thinking, this is the exact opposite of what we see being promoted. And it sounds long-winded and tedious. Honestly, like, you know, if I think of it, I'm a real activist learner. So like, I love to jump in and just learn, and I don't read instruction manuals or watch how-to videos or anything. Like, I just wing it. However, I realized that all of this is like critical to the success of new products scaling and that. So tell me about some of the challenges that come with that, because obviously we're used to now seeing quick business journeys that didn't exist before the invent of or at least were very uncommon before the invent of social media and the internet as it is today. And so we're used to expecting, you know, high turnovers within months, right? And what you're talking about is actually taking months to figure out if an idea is going to work before you're really earning any money from it. So how does that land when you do that with clients, when you're testing things out for yourself? What are the kind of what's the resistance that you come up against?
Discipline. Right. So when we work with clients, so it's not that it takes about months to run an experiment, but it does. So when I say discipline, it basically means that you have to accept that for the next 4 weeks, you might have to pull back on doing active delivering of stuff to your clients, because for the next 4 weeks, you're basically running business experiments. Some of my clients have actually earned money from running their business experiments. So again, an experiment does not have to be that it's burning your revenue. You can actually use it as a way to generate a little bit of revenue. And that gives you an idea of whether or not, okay, this is really something we should pursue. But it comes back to that discipline and that patience. And then being also not that it's boring, but it's a bit tedious to be clear. It's a bit tedious to be clear around like what it is you're trying to test and put all of those thoughts on paper. But once it's on paper, and then once you can test it out, I think you'll be surprised how quickly that goes. So on average, it takes us about 4 to 6 weeks to test out a business experiment. Our recommendation in those 4 to 6 weeks is to run about 3 business experiments. And the business experiments should always cater to what are the big business opportunities available to you. And the way how we identify those big business opportunities are essentially what are the biggest things that could stop your business from growing, whether it's a new competitor coming into the market or a change in consumer behaviors that you didn't anticipate, or let's say policy change or for example, Brexit happened, lots of changes around VAT. So all of those stuff, right? If you were to step back and look at all of these risks, can you flip them into an opportunity and then be like, oh, there's some really interesting stuff, even though VAT could really pull us back. Can we use that in our advantage to grow? And what type of experiments can we run? It just also means that you are able to anticipate problems. And instead of coming from a place of fear, come from a place of creativity, because you are using those problems as a growth opportunity.
And I think that's fascinating. Like something that keeps coming up, and obviously the situation that we've been in with COVID, there's been a lot of pivoting going on, and fear-driven pivoting, which has been something I've talked about a little bit on my socials. But it's obvious, I think, when new products and pivots are done through fear, that comes through quite loudly. There's often some disconnect with the business, the brand, the owner, or the clients, or a combination of those things. And it can be a surprise. It can do some damage. It can work for a short period of time and then not. There's so many risks involved with sort of fear-driven pivots and launches and product development, I suppose.
Yeah.
But when you can flip that into something, like you say, something positive, where you find an opportunity in it, and the opportunity is exciting and positive and creative, and it aligns, you do all the testing, it aligns with your brand, it aligns with your values, it works for your clients, it's meeting a need, it works for you as a business owner. That's where the magic happens, isn't it? That's where you hit on the thing that you can run forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe what some people feel is that, like, I think there's a science to how you run a business. I think there's a science to figuring out what products and services work and what products don't. I know some people are very like, I want to follow my intuition. So do I. But I also think that there is patterns and stuff. And I'm always looking for those patterns. And with my clients, what I try to get them to do is look for patterns as well. So a great example that I always bring in my one-to-one with clients is Argos and HMV, which essentially are two companies who were going through digital transformation. And the big thing that was happening in the market that had nothing to do with the business was consumer behaviors were changing. People were shopping more online. So click and collect became a thing. People were less on the high street. And what you realize as a business is that you can't change consumer behavior. I mean, you can influence it, but you can't drastically change it. It might take years before you can change it. I mean, we've seen Google change behaviors and Apple, but what I'm getting to is that some consumer behaviors, you just need to accept it for what it is and then basically anticipate how that's going to impact your business and use that as an opportunity. So for Argos, it was lots of people are shopping online and less on the high street. Let's use, like, how might we cater to more of those people? Because that's where the demand is. And for them, it was moving to smaller Argos click and collect stores, hubs across the country versus being on the high street. So if you look at Argos, you won't see many on the high street. You see them more in like suburb areas. And they purposely did that because people are shopping from online at home and they just want to click and collect something. HMV, their strategy was like, let's get people back on the high street, but it's like, that's a big thing. And I think maybe another kind of big consumer behavior that we're seeing now is people are being, while people are saving more because they're not traveling as much, they're also being a lot more frugal and a lot more around what they spend their money on, where they spend it. And I think maybe the question therefore for your business could be, how might we use this as an opportunity to grow? How might we use the opportunity where people are being very selective about where they spend their money to benefit us? And what that could mean is, we know that we create top quality jumpers, and because people are frugal, they want to go for higher quality. Can we communicate our high quality value more effectively to our customers so that they shop with us because they're looking at quality, not quantity anymore? So those are the type of really cool things that you get to do when you flip this kind of negative risks and fears into constructive, positive, and innovative opportunities. And
these are the kind of conversations that are missing, I think. Like when I reflect on the online business world, I think this stuff just doesn't get spoken about. So we get in fact, I'm going to ask you as well what trends you've seen that are counterproductive or could be counterproductive. But certainly from my perspective, I see a lot of these cookie cutter type businesses and business models coming out, and you can do this course, you can do this qualification, then you can do this job, and this is how you do it, and these are the frameworks you work in, and there's I get that franchising is a thing and it's been very successful. You only have to look at McDonald's to understand the concept and the success possibilities behind franchising. But there are also challenges that come with it. And the challenges of doing it blindly are that you are you could be missing a trick, right? So you're missing these key opportunities that could actually lead you to scale a business that you want, that you love, in a way that works for you and for the clients that you work with, or the customers that you have. So if you're product based in the same way, you know, it's just being really clear, I think, on what you want, and therefore what you need to be looking at, and not just following the crowd.
So that's really interesting, right? Because I think, so at Uniqueable, our big thing is that our quote is that we untangle the chaos around growth so that you can think clearly. That is what we promise. If you want to think clearly, this is how you do it. You think about it scientifically, you test, you get data, you validate, you learn. And that's also the only path out of chaos.
Yes.
I think most people when they get chaos, they come from a place of like fear, and then it's always very reactive. Like, I'm reacting to something happening to me, whereas our main thing is take a step back. What can you test and validate? What can you learn? And then use those learnings as opportunities where you can grow.
Yeah. And what are some of these things that you see that are really unhelpful for the long term of a business?
Not moving everything online. It is basically because everyone is doing master classes, I'm going to do master classes. Because everyone is moving to Instagram or Clubhouse, I'm going to move to Instagram or Clubhouse. Someone asked me one time, like, oh, are you on Clubhouse? And I'm like, yes, I did catch the bait. I did create an account. And then I had to pause and ask myself, what is it that I'm actually trying to achieve here? And also, are my clients here? And also, how does this, like, what? Like, is going onto Clubhouse, not going onto Clubhouse, is that the biggest risk I see that could stop my business from growing? And when I said no, I was like, okay. And I'm not discrediting it. I'm sure it's a great platform, but I'm not an influencer. I'm a businesswoman. They're two different things. And I think that's a misconception that people have, is that you can be an influencer, but to be a businesswoman or a business person in general, I think it's a different type of thinking that you have. So I think that's a misconception, following the herd and jumping from one social platform to another. And or another thing is kind of copy pasting strategies that work for other people. So bad strategy does not include the risks that you see for your business. Good strategy will always include the risks that you see for your business. And that's why I say cookie cutter is like, follow these 10 steps. A non-cookie cutter is, the principle of good strategy is that you see problems, you anticipate them, you flip them into opportunities, and then you come up with coherent actions to address.
Good old SWOT analysis can be a great starting point.
Exactly. And what you start to realize is that every business has a subjective view. So what the risks are for your business will definitely not be the same for my business. And by that default alone, both our strategies are going to look very differently, even though we both operate and have online businesses. So I think that's the big mistake I see, is that people download these workbooks and like, download this workbook and it will solve all of your problems and your business will grow. I actually asked a question to someone the other day, because one of my challenges is I'm really crap at social media and I'm crap at creating social media content. So I asked someone, I'm really struggling in the creating of social media content. And their response was, but you just need the pillars. I have the pillars. And they're like, but you need, and I was like, okay, I get the theory. I get that you have pillars. I get that they're carousels, but my issue is the generating. So can I see an example? And I think bringing more of the practical examples into it that we miss.
Yeah. And it's one of the best things I've done for my business, actually, is to take the marketing of my business and work with an expert, and not and there's nothing wrong. I'm not discrediting social media managers or anything. I think they do an incredibly valuable job. However, what I needed was a step back from that. So I needed to understand how to strategically use the different platforms that I operate on and to grow certain elements. Like my SEO drastically needed improving. I wanted to generate more organic traffic to my website so that I'm not relying on posting on social media. And, Instagram has been incredibly valuable for my business. I met you on there. I met a number of other people that I am now very good friends with, and I have got clients through Instagram as well. However, it's not a sustainable marketing model. And so for me, I'm really focusing on that. And I just didn't know where to start. And because I'm not a marketeer, like I know what the platforms are. I know that I can, do pay-per-clicks, and I know I can do podcasts, and I know I can do Pinterest. I don't know where to start with them. So I work with a marketing strategist who is an absolute genius. And she has taken my brand, so everything that I am about, and my ideal clients who I want to reach, and then me, like where I feel comfortable as well, so that I'm not doing, she's not telling me to do things that I just would never do. And she's come up with this incredible strategy that starts at the top. It starts with the evergreen long form content that is on platforms that isn't getting much traction right now because it's relatively new and it takes time to build. And that's why I think people resist it, is because there's no immediate response, serotonin rush, or whatever you want to call it. And then it filters down. So now I'm really clear on what I'm doing on my socials, because I know what my other stuff is, and what the purpose of every platform is. And that was the best thing I ever did, because when I just had socials, I was like, what the heck do I put out there? And
it's literally I was gonna say, it's literally like there are 1,001 painkillers, but you don't just go and self-medicate, right?
Yes.
I mean, you go to a pharmacist or you go to a GP and you're like, they run a diagnosis. I think that's the part that we don't do enough diagnosis, and then identifying what doesn't work and what does work, and based on that choose a solution. I also love the fact that you looked at SEO. So some of the things I've done with my clients when we map out the customer experience is that I kind of ask them, like, how do people get onto, how do they get to you? Because at the moment, all I can see is a huge focus on social media. But I'm like, there's a whole world of SEO stuff that we are missing. And it's like, if Instagram was to break down tomorrow, would your business cope? And these are some really tough questions that I think people don't realize, that when they are looking for something, the first place they go to is Google. And what you can do, if you're wondering about like, okay, but where do I start, is that Google does a really great trend insight. Kind of like I think it's like a website, but it's part of Google. And you can put down your market, and you can put down the services or products, and it starts to kind of give you indications as to what people are actively searching. And that's a really great place to kind of, and the questions they're asking Google, and you can turn that into content material for your website. And that can then drive traffic to your website, and also follow Google's algorithm changes if you're curious about what it wants, because those algorithm changes basically tell you how to work with the algorithm and not against it. Because if you work against it, you get penalized. And if you get penalized, you basically are at, like, when it's like page 1, 2, 3, and it goes to 100, like you're not even at 100. You're lucky if you're at 100.
You basically don't exist.
You don't exist. So those are little things that we do when we are looking at commercialization, but from an aspect of your customer experience, because that's the first bottleneck that we see with most businesses, is just get that out of the way, get that really good, start blogging, if you don't like blogging, podcasting, but just put something out there so that SEO ranking of your site can go up. So,
and it's building authority. It's the, that you can guest blog, you can guest podcast, you can like there's so much you can do that could drive traffic to your website that doesn't involve you having to feed the monster, as I call it, of social media platforms and push people to your website. You can allow them to find you through other means that don't require you to be present, which is gold dust.
And most people, I forgot, it was the report around, and it was actually on the Netflix series called The Social Media something. Most people, when they're scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, they're in a state of passive thinking. So they're not really in a place of like actively searching for help. But when they're on Google, it's a different type of thinking.
Okay. That's really interesting.
And that's really interesting. So some of the things that we are looking at doing this year as we go through a website redesign is starting to build more of that authority on Google, so that when people are Googling things like how to create a business plan, we're there, or how to test my business idea, we're there as well. Because I don't think people are actively searching on Instagram how to test an idea. I think people follow Instagram because there's some pretty pictures and great brands to connect with. And it gives you kind of like a entertainment while everyone is in lockdown. But you need to be quite clear. I'm not a marketeer. I just think about things commercially, and I think about how do we get people to you, and when they're there, how do we get them to stay there and buy more of you, and what problems and customer problems are you not solving that you could solve so that you could grow. That's literally all I do.
Which is perfect. I mean, that's the puzzle piece that everybody wants, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you now for 3 tips. So if somebody is thinking about scaling their business, growing or scaling their business, what would you say the best places to start? 3 tips you'd give them.
Switch off social media for now, and design or revisit what your customer journey is like from the moment they purchase, and see what manual steps are you doing there that can be automated. And when I say automation, basically, do you really have to manually send an invoice, or can you not automatically do that? Little things like that. Scheduling, don't do that manually. We're in the 21st century, you shouldn't be doing. And then I think the third step that I would tell them to do is start creating artifacts that you can service in part of your customer journey. So whether or not it's you create a how-to guide, or even surveys, to start creating these things so that you can service them at certain touch points as the customer buys items from you. So those are the 3 things I would say.
Yeah. And I love that, because they're not the obvious answers.
No.
When people think about scaling, they're like, okay, give me the 3 steps to growing my business. And like you say, the kind of blueprints, but actually these are the foundational things that will enable that growth that you want to.
Absolutely.
So I love that. Perfect answer, which I wouldn't expect any less.
No worries at all.
Is there anything you wanted to add to the conversation that we haven't already covered?
No, I think that's it. I guess maybe even selfishly, if people have heard this and they're like, oh my God, I need some bespoke help around this. We've launched a new service called Pick My Brain, because I realized that some of our clients and potential clients, they need some more of an emergency help, and where it's an hour of my time versus like a full 3 months engagement. So if that's something that's up for you, it'll be on the website soon as we launch with a new website. But for now, it's on Instagram. It's a relatively straightforward path around getting that session booked in, but it's just there. Yeah, it's just
you can test out Nancy's customer journey.
Yes, let me know what you think of it. It's just that's there, because I can imagine people listening to this are like, oh my God, I need help, but I don't have the finances or the time to commit for like a couple of months. I just need an hour. Like
find the high impact, low hanging fruit stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from those hour session, trust me, you'll probably walk out with like a handful of things that you can chew on to start scaling tomorrow. So
Nice.
yeah.
Exciting. Great. Thank you. So we'll move on to the final quickfire wrap up questions. Change of pace, slightly less in depth than we've been, we've been
Yes.
covering. So, biggest plot twist that you've had in your career or business so far?
COVID. COVID.
Yeah.
Absolutely COVID. Yeah.
And what did it
COVID.
do? How did it change things for you?
Uh, I think it changed things in a way where I didn't anticipate starting Uniqueable in 2020. So I started a
Okay.
lot sooner. And that meant learning a lot quicker and just running. And I think I'm still running, and I might just catch my breath maybe, hopefully at some point. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Wow. Incredible. Okay. And the worst business advice you've ever received?
Because X did it, you can apply the same thing and get the same result. I've done that, tried it, and I went back and I'm like, it didn't work for me. Yeah.
Good. I totally agree. That's a terrible piece of advice. And so, tell me what's next for Uniqueable. Is there anything you want to share that's coming?
Yeah. So with you, we're looking at launching masterclasses this year. So that's something that's happening. And so masterclasses are coming online. And again, that's another way of us kind of like helping the businesses that come to us, because we can't be everywhere. And I know I said that this year we wouldn't be taking on new consulting clients, but given the fact that I've made a hire, it means that there's now a bit more capacity for us to take on new consulting clients. So that's going to be interesting as well. And so, a lot more innovation and growth coming up this year. But I'm also quite realistically that we are in lockdowns, and that does something to your mental health. So I'm trying not to be too stern or strict or rigid with our goals this year. But yeah.
Good. And I think that is the perfect way to end it, because for as much as we've talked about planning and testing and all the stuff that goes into running a business, actually the reality is within that, if you have a good plan and you have the right frameworks, you can be flexible and fluid and adjust and reset, and you don't need to press forward just because you said you would.
Exactly. I think that's the beauty of it, right? Once you have a plan, then it's about adjusting the plan, not mindlessly following it.
Right.
That's what I enjoy.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I have loved this conversation, and as always, could continue for a very long time.
Yes.
And no doubt we will on our next Zoom call.
Absolutely.
And thank you for tuning in to Innovate, Thrive, Other. I hope you find it useful and you've learned something that you can take away and implement in your business. Tag me if you are listening, because I would love to know who's listening. I'm at Innovate and Thrive Co on Instagram. And my website, if you want to check anything out, is innovateandthrive.co. Nancy, do you want to say where we can find you on Instagram and website?
Yeah, so you can check our website out, which currently we'll just have a coming soon page, but that's www.uniqueable.com. And you can check me out on Nancy Evbuomwan, or at Nancy Evbuomwan. And don't worry if you're wondering how the hell do I spell that. I'm sure it'll be written down somewhere for you to do that.
Yeah. 100%.
But those are the two places for you to find me.
Perfect. Good. Cool. Right. Thank you so much. That wraps us up for today. And thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.